Hi, I'm Casey. I'm a vascular access specialist. I think what inspires me most in my role as a vascular access specialist is just the fulfillment I get from the specialty. I started a long time in the ER, a long time ago in the ER, about 22 years ago, and I always thought emergency nursing was going to be my calling until I switched to vascular access, and now I know this is my calling. Very passionate about vascular access in all forms. Been helping build teams and expand practice for about the last 6 or 7 years, and that I feel is truly my calling. Everyone says this, and I find it kind of cliche, but again, I truly believe it. If you find something you love, you never have to work a day in your life, and that's kind of where I come from. My wife always asks, why do you work so much? And I'm like, well, it's really not work. I enjoy it so much. An important clinical issue I feel is underappreciated would be the vascular access specialty itself. We could touch on 15 to 20 topics right now. I don't have time to touch on those, of course. But I think the most primary one is it's just not as important in everyone's minds when they come into a hospital that they're going to be getting poked and prodded with needles. From our standpoint, we want to reduce the amount of venipunctures that our patients are receiving, and yet even when we get called for an ultrasound guided peripheral, it's truly fulfilling when your patient thanks you after you poke them with a needle. I mean, for me, that's a great feeling. But the thing that is underappreciated is people just poke and poke and poke, and we're ruining patients' veins. That's, I feel, the biggest thing. The vessel health and preservation, from the amount of 22 years of being in this profession, I've noticed in the last 10 or 15 years that we're starting way more IVs, we're giving less IM and PO medications, so our IV therapy is increased on every single patient that we see come through the hospital doors. I would say my key recommendations to help improve patient outcomes, going back to my previous statements, we need to stop poking and prodding patients. I see patients every day that relay they've been 15 pokes to try to get one IV in. What we're seeing is that we're using ultrasound. We can place that peripheral IV and then they thank us. And what we've noticed is we also need to recommend and get everyone on the same page to where we are utilizing the smallest catheter in the largest vessel. Okay. Everyone I talked to in the hospital, my previous job of 3 years, I was on a rapid response vascular access code team, and we went from placing 18 gauges before I got there. They were placing a lot of 18 gauge large bore IVs in patients on the regular, and we changed the culture. We changed it to where we were putting 22 gauge IVs in people right off. And of course, changing culture comes with many conversations with staff, with other nurses. Most of the time it was I would go into a patient's room, I start their IV, they're happy, I come out, the nurse is unhappy because I put in 22 gauge IV in. And then they say, why'd you put that small catheter in? I can't give blood through it. And then that goes back to just the conversation, education. And most of the time when we talk about why a smaller catheter is better than a larger one, when we talk about flow dynamics, catheter vein ratio, before I knew the ins and outs of flow dynamics and catheter vein ratio, I didn't really understand the physiological effects of what a bigger catheter in a small vein is actually doing. When we don't have the flow around the catheter, your medications aren't diluted, you get high rates of thrombophlebitis, and we're seeing that as a whole in the hospital. I also believe and truly feel that recommendations for catheter length is a hot topic right now. When we use ultrasound, we're accessing vessels that are much deeper. And when we're not using longer catheters, we're seeing higher failure rates with that. So make sure we're using long enough catheters, small catheters, and that way we can all do our best to promote peripheral vascular health.